Alright, today we're going to talk a little bit about hydration. Because hydration is good. You need water to live. It's important. So, out of the many videos on YouTube that I'm sure you could watch that also talk about hydration, I'm going to make one too, but from a little bit different of a perspective. What I want to talk about today is looking at a uh, insulated um, water bottle as an option to use as part of your kit for your hydration needs. Now, instantly, and again, the reason why I have one of the 16-ounce Nalgene's here, the instant question I can think of that people are going to look at this and go, well, why would I get, one of these when this is infinitely cheaper, way lighter, and even a little bit smaller and does pretty much the same thing, holds the same amount of liquid. Um, and the reasons are simple. Water's good, cold water is better, or if you're in the winter, hot water is better, or any other kind of beverage like tea or hot chocolate or something else. I can't even say like this wasn't entirely my idea. I actually got this theory of adding a insulated bottle to my loadout from a British guy that I did some training with some years back. And one of his cadre was going over his Chestrick loadout online once, and he had a one of the Hydro Flask bottles as part of it, specifically for putting tea in. Because if British people, like, they gotta have their tea. Like, you pretty much can't. If you lose access to tea as a British person, you like lose your Brit card. Like, that's it. They'll throw you off the island. So, ready access to tea is a must. And who the hell wants to drink cold tea, especially in the winter? If you're into more like kind of a survival aesthetic, um, or prepper stuff, or even just outdoor use, you also know that um, either in different types of weather or in an emergency situation, having a some access to a warm or hot beverage um, can be really advantageous, and in some cases can in and of itself help to keep you alive. If you're familiar with, oh man, I'm probably misquoting this. I believe, well, there's a lot of examples of this, but off the top of my head, I believe if you go with the old story of Bravo 20, the SAS guys that got lost in the desert during the Gulf War, um, if I recall correctly, after they lost all their gear and were busy trekking through the desert at night and basically freezing to death because it decided to snow that day of all days. um, they I don't believe they actually had these with them, but they had the ability, if I recall correctly, I may be getting this wrong, but if I recall correctly, they had the ability to make some, I forget, it was either hot chocolate or tea, and that was pretty much what kept them going through the night and helped them to not freeze to death. So there's a bunch of different reasons why you might want access to either a hot or cold liquid with you throughout the day. And since this is, the modern era and we have access to cool items like these thermal flasks, um, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to not add them to your kit. Um, so we're going to talk about that a little bit today, as well as the differences between the Hydro Flask and the Iron Flask. So onto the actual meat of this video. On the right here, we have the Hydro Flask 16 ounce. I believe this is on their website. It falls under the coffee section. I don't understand why it's no different than any other bottle on the website. It's just smaller, and you can get it with a little screwy sippy lid thing. But anyways, it's 16 ounce Hydro Flask coffee. And then over here, we have the 18 ounce version from Iron Flask. The reasons for picking these is pretty much the same reason for this 16-ounce Nalgene bottle being here. If you notice, the Nalgene bottle is quite a bit smaller, but there are some items on the market between pouches and such that are advertised as being able to fit this 16-ounce Nalgene bottle as a feature as part of the pouch. For example, like this Spiritus Systems Mutant pouch here. The radio pouch can also fit this 16-ounce Nalgene bottle. So I looked at that and I went, well, looking at the average size of this Nalgene bottle, the average size of some of the larger magazine pouches and GP pouches and stuff on the market, I kind of looked at that and was like, well, the big, I guess, well, right now it's kind of making a bit of a resurgence, but, what's always kind of been, the sort of the standard for hydration, either on your kit or to mount onto a pack, has been the classic 1 liter, 32 ounce Nalgene. And so there's a whole bunch of, pouches and stuff on the market for that, as well as the standard USGI canteen. Whichever camp you fall into is, it's all personal preference. I kind of prefer the Nalgene bottles just because they're a little bit easier to clean, and I like the fact that I can mount them onto 2 vertical spaces of Molly instead of the 3 that a USGI canteen takes up, which really helps you to save a lot of space on your kit. But that's neither here nor there. The point being is, I looked at some of the pouches that were advertised as being able to fit a 16-ounce Nalgene, or pouches that sort of, I guess, inadvertently are able to fit them, whether they designed them to or not. And I looked at that and the sizes and everything. I said, you know what? Why settle for a bottle that it's stupidly light and stupidly cheap, and that's great, but if you leave any kind of liquid in this by midday, it's either really hot or really cold. And I was like, well, why not see if I can leverage the same type of pouches that I'm using for this already for something that's of similar size, but has a bit better feature set that will allow me to, have a more pleasant time with what I'm drinking, whether it's either cold weather or hot weather. And so I started looking around at like different sizes, and given your average M4 30 round magazine is like 7 inches, 7.5, somewhere in there, depending on the type of magazine. So I said, well, why wouldn't it fit, in the same slot as this if it's just slightly taller? So that, and then of course, like I said, some people I've seen in the past that have done similar things kind of got me on a search for what bottles I could use, and more importantly, how I could maximize this space to fit the most amount of liquid in the smallest amount of space while getting the features that I wanted. So after buying several bottles and going through those, the ones that I've settled on as the most useful for use in like a tactical sense are the ones you see here. If you're not going to run the Nalgene, it's down to the 16-ounce Hydro Flask coffee or the 18-ounce Iron Flask. Now, there are some slight differences in size that do play a role, but overall they're surprisingly similar, and I thought that was kind of uncanny, and I'm going to have a couple comments later about whether I think the difference in these things really matters at all. But anyways, let's start off with a little bit of a simple comparison. So between this and that, you're looking at about, let me get my piece of paper here so I can remember what to say. So I got the Hydro Flask with the sippy cup twist top coffee lid, as well as the standard lid. The Iron Flask came with 3 lids. I'm not going to show the steel lid here because it's pretty much the same size as the Hydro Flask lid, and I don't need to be muddling about with a 4th lid here, a 5th lid here. But I got it with this cool little screw cap lid, the pop-up lid, and then of course the standard steel lid that there's no point in me reviewing because we all know what it does. Right off the bat, you can see that between the two of them, with the biggest lids on each of them, there's, and you might not be able to see it from this angle, it looks like a lot more difference than it really is. But having measured this out with both a tape measure and some calipers, because I'm freaking OCD like that, there's literally about, I think it's 1¼ inches difference between these two bottles with the biggest lids each one has on them. That kind of does and does not play a role, depending on what type of pouch you're putting it in. Anyways, we'll go over the dimensions right now, since that's what we're talking about, and talk about the differences here, so you can get a better idea of what I'm going to talk about later when I talk about fitment. With the Hydro Flask, with the standard lid, the Hydro Flask is just slightly over 7.25 inches, so almost the same exact size as a PMAG, 30-round PMAG. With this cool little pop-up lid that I got with the Iron Flask, it is 7 5/8 inches. With the cap lid that the Iron Flask has on it right now, it is 8 1/8 or slightly less. And then with the zipper lid on here that I have already installed, it is 7 5/8 inches. For the Iron Flask, given that there is a slight difference in height, given that it is an 18-ounce container versus a 16-ounce, with the standard lid or a steel lid that it has, either one of those is going to be just slightly over 7 7/8 inches. With the pop-up lid, it is 8.25 inches. With the cap lid that it has on it, it is just a hair under 8 3/4 inches. And then with the zipper lid that the Hydro Flask has on it, it is just a tiny tad over 8.25 inches. So as you can see, we're talking, depending on which lid you prefer, a very, very small difference in sizing. Ironically, with the two biggest lids on each one of them is where you're going to see the biggest sizing difference. And like I said before, I measured it out with some calipers, and it's about 1 1/4 inches, give or take a teeny bit, for variance. The first thing I'll mention as well, the next thing I'll mention, is that, to my great surprise, both lids from both Hydro Flask and Iron Flask are actually interchangeable. The threads on these bottles seem to be exactly the same, because I have a sneaking suspicion that the Iron Flask is just a slightly cheaper ripoff of the Hydro Flask, but I'll get to that later. But anyways, the threads are, the diameters and threads seem to be exactly the same, and it doesn't matter which lid you put on here, they all fit the same. They all seal up perfectly, no leaks, no problems at all. So the cool thing about this is if you have one or the other, and let's say I prefer the screw cap lid on my Hydro Flask, I can just go on Amazon or the Iron Flask website and buy the lid that I like, or if you like this pop-up lid or whatever, I can buy whichever lid I like and put it on my Hydro Flask. Or if you prefer the Hydro Flask lid, like this little twist sip coffee lid, and I say, well, I like that better than this, any of these options from Iron Flask, you can just buy this and put it on your Iron Flask. That's absolutely great, and I really wish, this is something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that I may have mentioned before in previous reviews, not having things be kind of industry standardized and everyone kind of wants to have their own boutique thing because they want you to buy their own specific products. It annoys the living shit out of me. Especially when it comes to stuff like this, where it's like bottles and stuff. Like, everyone just pick a size, pick a thread pitch, and go with it. And that way, no matter who makes an item, if you have, just like this, an item from one company that you like, then another item from another company you like, and you want to just Lego them together, being able to do that is absolutely great. Seriously, it's like so, I want to say it's so freeing to be able to just go, oh, I like this, I like that, I slap them together, I'm done. Instead of going, oh man, they have option A, and this company has option B, and no company on earth makes option C that has both these things together. It's so nice to be able to just mix and match things that you like. So that's absolutely great. As far as the rest of the specs go, when compared to a simple little 16-ounce Nalgene bottle like this, there really is no comparison. I mean, this thing weighs 0.16 ounces empty with the lid. The Hydro Flask empty with just the shell is... Oh, nope, that's the Iron Flask. The Iron Flask empty, just the shell, for the 18-ounce is 0.54. And for the, Hydro Flask, the empty shell alone is 0.48 of a pound. Not ounces, it's of a pound because, yeah. So anyways, about just under half a pound for either of these, which obviously is pretty significant compared to the weight of this, which doesn't weigh anything, and that's just with the shell. For the Hydro Flask with the factory sipper lid, it weighs 0.70 of a pound. For the factory lid with this one, which is the cap, it comes in some different variations. You can get it either factory lid with the pop-up or the cap, but some of them, if you order it with the cap, will also come with the pop-up lid. There's a bunch of options on their website, either if you get it off the Iron Flask website or off Amazon. You just pick which one you like better. At the time that I ordered this, the screw cap lid was the versions that have the 3 lids with the screw cap, the pop-up, and the standard lid were out of stock on the website, so I had to go on Amazon to get it. Because I hate the straw pop-up lids, which are just impossible to clean. And I will also touch on that later when I talk about which of these lids is the most useful from a tactical perspective, or even an outdoor perspective, whichever way you want to look at it. But with the factory screw cap lid, this thing weighs 0.66 of a pound. So, ironically, it's actually a little lighter with the factory lid than the Hydro Flask is with the factory lid. And it's a slightly bigger bottle, which is an interesting little dichotomy that I'm going to touch on right now, and that is that not only are the sizes very similar with this, but the weights are a lot closer than I thought they'd be. Part of that is, again, I have some suspicions about the Iron Flask versus the Hydro Flask as far as quality goes, but I'll touch on that later. But anyways, when they're full with a full quantity of liquid, and what I counted as a full quantity of liquid was not all the way to the top, I counted to the top of the lip. So with liquid, once it came up to the top of the edge here, that was full. For full weights, for the Hydro Flask, 16 ounce, with the sipper cap, the full weight is 1.74 pounds. With the pop-up cap, the full weight is 1.64 pounds. With the screw cap, the weight is also 1.64 pounds. And ironically, with the standard cap here, the weight is 1.70. For the Iron Flask 18 ounce, with the screw cap, is 1.78 pounds. With the standard top, is ironically 1.84, with the sipper from the Hydro Flask uh, is 1.88, and with the pop-up cap is 1.78. So between all of them, you're looking at about what, 0.20? Yeah, so quick guesstimate of like 0.20-ish, give or take, um, between the two full, regardless of which lid they have on it. So you're looking at about a whopping quarter-ish pound difference between the two of them. Um, in my opinion, I don't think that's worth caring about, unless you're really trying to pinch every single ounce you can possibly pinch, um, which is a fair point, considering the use case that I am talking about this within. You're going to have, a chest rig or a plate carrier full of, other ammunition and gear and radios and batteries and med shit and all the other fun stuff you get to carry around with you. So perhaps squeezing every ounce out of things is potentially important to you, but if it came down to a choice between the two and you were going to try to make that choice on weight alone, I think a quarter pound is not really an issue, or at least not something worth making a choice over. If anything, the overall size difference with whatever cap you choose, I think will play more of a role because it's going to affect how it fits in another pouch. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to pinch every bit of weight you can, you go with the Nalgene. It weighs nothing, and it costs way the hell less than these do anyway. But again, like I've mentioned before, we're not trying to pinch weight here. We're going for an enhanced feature set, and therefore the weight is irrelevant because you're trying to get something that this can't offer. Either way, even with the heaviest option at 1.88 pounds, that's still less than 2 loaded 30-round magazines. So, considering you're probably carrying a whole bunch of those with this already anyway, I kind of think that's, again, a little bit of an irrelevant consideration. If you're trying to pinch every ounce that you can, maybe that's an issue for you. I mean, there are people out there that literally cut the handles off their toothbrushes because, well, they're nuts. But anyways, so yeah, you're not looking at much difference in weight. You're not looking at much difference in size. So let's talk a little bit about the caps themselves, so I can get this stuff out of the way and talk about the pouches. I feel like, again, for either a more aggressive outdoor use or for a tactical use, there are obviously some pros and cons to the different types of caps that are available here. I don't have one of the pop-up sipper caps because I think they're stupid, and I hate the straws that fold over on the top. Like I said, I've personally found those things to be just a real pain in the ass to clean, and taking that one step further into a tactical environment, if you are end up in somewhere that's extremely muddy, or something similar to that, if either you're dragging that item through the mud or you drop it in the mud, etc., and that flip up area gets all clogged and compacted with that shit, it's just going to be a pain in the ass to clean it out. It's going to get in the mouth portion of that, and that to me is kind of a no-go, as you're now pretty much, unavoidably inducing contaminants into where you're going to drink from. I think that also holds true if you're going to be in something, which is even more common in a tactical environment, which is dust. If you're going to be shooting or around vehicles or, just in a sandy and or dry environment, dust is a thing. It's everywhere. Like, fuck dust. But anyways, and dust is going to get in there. Now, you could make a little bit of an argument and say, well, most people use a hydration bladder, and you're sucking on the end of that thing, and the end of that is, hanging out on your kit, getting full of mud and dust and shit, and that is a fair point. However, the ones that are actually worth a shit usually come with a cap that goes on the mouthpiece. um, so there's that. I guess you could say, well, you could always lose the cap, and that's true as well. But my point being, the companies, like I said, that are actually worth a shit to buy a hydration bladder from have thought of a way to mitigate contaminants getting into that mouthpiece. And if it's been a priority for them to think about, producing a little widget part to slip over the end of the mouthpiece, then in my opinion, it's worth you considering for a cap to go on a bottle. Um, so, anyways, yeah, so I didn't want the straw anyway because, like I said, I feel like that's just not only difficult to clean, but it's an open area where contaminants are going to get into. I very much feel the same thing about this sipper cup cap coffee lid. um, I like the theory, but again, it's an open top with a reverse lip on it. So it's basically a little plate here that when it's sitting in a pouch or whatever is just going to collect dust and debris and shit in this little thing. And then because there's nothing to cover up this spout where your mouth accesses the liquid, or you drink out of, whichever way you want to say that. If you want to use more words or less, it's up to you. I'm amazing at talking. The mouth liquid access port. Is that tactical enough? Anyways, there's nothing to cover this. And it's also rubber on the inside. And it has to, oh God, it has to spin in order for it to open itself. So not only are you going to be, any contaminants that get introduced into this lip are going to want to funnel into this dust, debris, etc., mud, and then if you have to spin this lid, it's going to get in all this rubber down here. We all know what dust likes to do with sticky rubber. So if you're constantly, throughout the course of the day, spinning this thing to get, it opened to mouth access the liquid, you're going to be constantly just working all that dust and mud and whatever debris has gotten in here into the rubber gasket in here, and I think eventually you're going to end up either damaging that rubber to the point where it doesn't seal, or it's going to start to freeze up. The other reason why I consider this sipper cap coffee lid a no-go is because all it takes is a half a turn to the other direction, and I'm not going to do it all the way, but a half a turn to the other direction and it falls apart, because that's how you disassemble it. So if you're not paying attention, or it's dark, or you're in a rush and you're fumbling for, liquid for some reason, if you accidentally turn this the wrong way, you've broken it. That's it. You're going to have to then spend some time to reassemble it after you turn it the wrong way, and then it falls off the top of it, and you're going, oh God, what do I do now? Or worse, you're not expecting it to come apart, and you drop it on the ground, and it spills everywhere, and it's just stupid. So, yeah, not a cool option for serious use. Of course, you're going to use a standard lid. I fucking hate the standard lid because having to unscrew the entire lid every time you want to drink is fucking stupid. And then having to try and drink out of the entire, wide mouth open top of this with like two hands to hold it steady like you're a fucking child trying to like drink all the milk out of the pitcher, something like that. Trying to drink all the orange juice out of the pitcher in the morning while you're driving down a bumpy road or something like that, or trying to walk along is just the height of idiocy. So fuck that. that's useless. So yeah, that's 3 options out, which leaves us with these two. And these two, both the pop-up lid and the screw cap, are, I think, actually pretty good options for either more aggressive outdoor use or for a tactical use. For starters, we'll go over the pop-up lid here. This big fixed plastic thing on the end is sort of like, I'm kind of 50-50 on it. On the one hand, just turn it sideways and it's out of the way and it doesn't really matter when you put it in a pouch. On the other hand, if you're putting your flask on your gear next to other things on your gear, this thing sticks out. So if there's something next to your gear that it's, you're going to hit against or ride up on top of, or alternatively that you may need to pull out of a pouch next to it, this is going to interfere with that. This can easily be solved by 5 minutes with a hacksaw. If you really just love this lid and have to use it, this is just, it's tough plastic, but you can just hacksaw it off. It's not hard to do, trust me. But anyways, so the pop cap here has a little rubber boss on the bottom for both the mouth access port and the breather port. And it's very similar in design to the sipper lid from Hydro Flask, just a little bit bigger. However, it does a really good job, I think, when it closes up. It's very nice and tight, and does a pretty good job of, there's not a huge gap here between the flip-up part and the other sides of it. So this will do a great job of defending against contaminants, except for on the edge, which, is potentially where some of your mouth may go. But this is also a pretty easy area to wipe off. So unless you got, somebody else's blood all over it, was a little dirt between friends. Yeah, the only other potential problem could be if you don't clean this off before you open it, you could potentially insert, stuff here into the lip, or it could feed into this. But again, this is nice and flush and is, really easy to just wipe off if it really came down to it. So I think this is acceptable for use in a tactical setting. The only thing I do not like about it, again, is the fact that it is a flip top, and there's nothing to lock this down. So there is a potential, however slight, for this to get caught on something, or knocked, or whatever. Again, like I said, if you have this on your kit, this lid does kind of cant back a bit, so it actually doesn't stick out as far as you think. It's very close to, almost flush with the edge of the thing. So if you have it on your kit next to stuff, the likelihood of it being caught on anything like this is much smaller, but it can still be caught and potentially knocked open. Like if you were, let's say you had it next to a magazine pouch or a grenade pouch or something, or your sling catches on it, and then you go to raise your rifle and you yank this open. It doesn't take very much to just get it open just enough to allow liquid to pour out if you then go prone or, roll over or something, or if you're running and it's sloshing. And then, of course, it's obviously not sealed, so the potential for this to open up and either spill everywhere or have contaminants induced not only into the drinking area, but potentially even directly into the bottle itself is a thing. It does close pretty tight, but like I said, it doesn't take that much effort to pull it up. Like, per my previous example, if your sling or something were to catch on this when you try to rapidly raise your rifle, it will pull it open. Otherwise, not bad. And if you prefer this to a screw cap like this, potentially worth going with. Anyways, enough blathering about that. We have the final option, which is this neat little screw-off chug nozzle cap thing. It's kind of a hybrid between kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Nalgene chug type caps that come with I think it's 20-ounce, 21-ounce bottles, with the stupid handle and the lock on it that everybody hates. Kind of a cross between that and a cap that goes with the Nalgene bottle. And what this does is there's an internal thread inside of this spigot, and then the cap fits over the spigot, shielding it, and then screws onto the inside of the nozzle. This area here is a little squishy. I think it's a potential weak point. It's strong enough once it's closed, you're not going to break it unless you throw it off a mountain. but when it's opened, if you're not careful and it gets caught on something or dropped on the floor, you could potentially break this. However, this does pop right out. It pops out really easily, so again, if you drop it or something, there's a pretty good chance you're going to lose this. But even if this did break off, you could still use it without needing that. So that's pretty good, and in my opinion, this is the best option out of the bunch. Not only does it provide you with a really great like nozzle for drinking out of so you don't spill it all over your face, but it also is the only it's the only cap I've ever seen that offers you a drinking nozzle or a smaller port other than just opening the whole bottle up and chugging it like a child. It's the only cap I've ever seen anyone make that, well, aside from a cap for Nalgene bottles, but that won't fit this. So I guess I should clarify and say this is the only cap I've seen for a, steel flask that actually has not only a drinking port, but that has something that covers it completely and screws onto it so that it can't accidentally be knocked off or fall off or anything else. So, in my opinion, even though this little harness area is a bit weak, the cap itself is the best version for a tactical flask. The other thing I love about this too is the little hanger strap in the back here, which again is also articulated and folds down. So you still have a full-sized, way to carabiner this to something or tie it down or whatever without it sticking out like this does, or without it being a super annoying, like, little fucking, like, beach pail handle, because this, it does fold out of the way, but what will happen is it will interfere with the closure of a pouch. So in my opinion, if you're considering either of these steel flasks for, serious use, either order the Iron Flask with the screw-on cap, or order your Hydro Flask with whatever the cheapest cap option you can get is, and then go on Amazon or the Iron Flask webpage and order the screw-on caps by themselves. I believe they come in packs of 2. So if you're going to get, more than one of these, you'll have, enough for more than one, or you'll have a spare. Anyways, and like I said before, as I mentioned, this is a rubber piece back here. I don't really care whether it's rubber or not. It could be plastic for all I care. But I very much prefer the way that this folds out of the way to the side of wherever the cap is, because it makes it way easier to get it out of the way when you're putting it in a pouch. It doesn't have the same overrun issues that this one does, and unlike this little beach pail thing, it's a little bit easier to get it out of the way so that it doesn't interfere with how a pouch closes, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Alright, so yeah, let's get this lids out of the way and get to the pouches. Alright, so for reference sake, we're going to start with this classic 16-ounce Nalgene, because we'll start with that with the Spiritus Mutant pouch, because I think that's what most people are going to look at this and go, aha, this is what he's talking about, and it kind of is. This is, like I said, half this and half some stuff I've seen in the past is where I got the idea for trying to find this an option for an on-body tactical flask, let's call it that. Alright, so as you can see, this fits in a Spiritus Mutant pouch about perfectly. And from the top, well, maybe you can see that, maybe you can't, but the amount of space that it overruns is pretty minimal. It fits in this radio slot almost perfectly, and then when it gets to the rest of the pouch, it flexes through this elastic piece a little bit, about that much, so it doesn't take up too much on the inside of this pouch. both the Iron Flask and the Hydro Flask can fit in here. I'm just going to go with the Hydro Flask for now. But it is a much tighter fit. And it does take up a bit more space. It does a bit more excessively flex into the inside of the pouch. It still isn't extreme, but as you can see here from the bottom, if you look at the seam here and where the pouch is, it is definitely pulling the material out a little bit more than the Nalgene did. I'll go ahead and stick the Iron Flask in here just so that you guys watching this can have a comparison. It's almost exactly the same. There's very little difference. The diameter of these things is, again, pretty much 1-to-1. Very slight difference, if any. So there you have it. Fits in there okay. The real downside, however, that I've personally don't like to fitting these in the mutant pouch is not only does this flex into the main pouch a little bit, and it does take up some space in there, so depending on how big of an item you want to put in here, it can be a bit limiting. For example, I was hoping to put a Hydro Flask in there and then put my medical insert on the other side, because I like to run, a little bit bigger of a IFAC. And it fits great in there as it is right now, but once you put this in there, it kind of doesn't fit so great anymore. It then starts to push out on this side of the pouch here, obviously because it's got to make up the space somewhere. So, in my opinion, this is probably best suited for, what Spiritus themselves recommends, or a radio. The other thing I don't like with this, and again, this may be kind of personal preference, for some absurd reason, this has like no basis in reality. It doesn't matter, but as personal preference, I for some reason don't like the extra height of this sticking up out of the pouch, without like a flap to go over it. You can obviously adjust the bungee to go over it, and it does work okay as retention. So it's not a retention thing. I just, for some reason, find this flask sticking up out of this pouch to be obnoxious, which is saying something because I don't find it to be obnoxious if I put it in other pouches. So I don't know what it is. Like I said, it must just be a personal thing. If it works for you, rock on with it. But especially the Iron Flask one, which is even slightly taller than the Hydro Flask, it needs to be like in a pouch. I don't know. Maybe it's just my OCD brain cells telling me that it has to be in a pouch. Maybe it really just is a little bit less ideal in a pouch like this versus something else. I don't know. Like I said, if it's something that doesn't bug you, then either of these will fit in a Spiritus Mutant pouch with just a little bit extra space taken up, both between how it flexes out the material on the side and how much space it takes up in the main body of the pouch. Otherwise, it works okay. As far as the rest of the pouches go, so here we have sort of the kind of opposite, well, I won't say opposite ends of the spectrum, but similar type pouches. This is the Platitac 152 Nalgene combo hydration pouch, and then this is the ATS slim upright pouch. And these are made for fitting a full-size Nalgene bottle, even with the the tallest lid. Well, actually, I think the pop cap is a tiny bit taller, but not by much. A Hydro Flask 16 ounce will fit in here just fine with about an inch or so. Well, let's go a little over it. Let's say inch and a half, give or take. It's just a bit loose in the pouch, so once you zip it up in there, there's about this much excess space in there. So it's not really ideal because this is just going to flop around in there. But, you know, if you like took your Nalgene out one day and then just want to throw this in there, sure, it fits. It's whatever. The Iron Flask with the cap lid as its tallest option, it fits in here just about exactly. That cap comes right to the top of the underside of the zipper, and it fits in here exact. Still has the same amount of play in it, so, you know, it's still going to flop around in here, but it does fit in here, even with this super tall lid. Just not ideal. So, of course, if that's not ideal, then a pouch that's even slightly bigger than the ATS upright GP pouch there is obviously going to be even worse, but I'm going to throw the biggest bottle in here anyway, just to prove it, because I can. Again, this fits in here perfectly vertically. This pouch is slightly bigger than the ATS pouch, so you get about, with it fully in there, let's see, almost an inch of space excess. So obviously it fits in there just fine. There's just, you know, it's a lot of excess in there with just this. As I pointed out before in the review of this combo pouch, this does fit in the radio slot on the inside if you take a little time to put it in there. But again, as you're seeing right now, this is why I don't advocate doing this, because this radio slot is stupid and annoying and a real pain in the ass to try and get anything in there if you're either not able to look directly into the pouch or if there's other stuff in the pouch. And then, of course, as I've mentioned before, this does take up, you know, most of the space in the pouch once it's in there, so now that it's actually perfectly centered in the pouch, and you're kind of stuck with, you know, there's still excess space, but it's a little bit on the sides and a little bit in front. So trying to fit anything else in here, again, like I mentioned in the review previously, is pretty much a total waste of a giant-ass pouch like this. Do I really need to mention what this does in here? Yeah, we'll mention it. There you go. It pretty much just disappears. In case you really want to find a way to waste a giant pouch like this. There you go. So, ironically, what I found to be the best pouches for either a 16-ounce Hydro Flask or the 18-ounce Iron Flask bottles here are some of the bigger magazine pouches on the market. This one here is the Platattack M4AK pouch, and this one here is the Direct Action, I think it's called the Tac Reload pouch or something like that. Considering this is made to fit a pair of AK magazines, and this is made to fit, well, pretty much everything, there's a lot of variation in these pouches as far as the space goes, which makes them perfect for alternate uses. I may even talk about these more a little bit by themselves later, because you could just do so much stuff with these. This one especially, I've actually used this before, and will probably be using it again once I reorganize my kit to put my IFAK in. It's great for that and a variety of other things. But it's also perfect for a small hydration pouch. So again, we'll go with our control here for a 16-ounce Nalgene. As you can see, pretty much fits completely within this one. In fact, the flap in this is so long because it has to deal with AK magazines that it's goes off the bottom of the pouch. So it's not really ideal if you already have some of these pouches or want them, and you're going to put just a basic Nalgene in here. This bottle is a lot smaller than you'd think it is, and there's a solid probably 2 inches of flap that just hangs off the bottom here. It has plenty of Velcro retention, so that's not going to hurt it, but this just flaps around annoyingly, and then because this is loose, it's also going to catch on shit, which is always going to lead to, as you run around, if you catch on a bush, oh no, they hear you, they're going to get you, you know what I mean, or it could get caught on something and just ripped open, and this is going to go flying out to God knows where. I guess you could always, carabiner it down, or dummy cord it down, but whatever, you get my point. The flap on this thing is ridiculously long. The unfortunate part is the length of this is great for alternate uses, but for things that are shorter, not so great. And that even includes like double M format pouches, but we'll get that some other day. Anyways, it works great for either of these options. The Hydro Flask 16 ounce with the zipper lid fits in here just about perfectly. There's, about 1.5 inches of Velcro non-purchase. But other than that, it's perfect. And ironically, this bottle is it doesn't actually flex out too much in the back, so it doesn't get super like roly-poly when it's on your gear. I know it's kind of hard to say right now, but when you actually have it mounted to either a chest rig or a cummerbund, as with other Planetag pouches, it has these slightly stiffened attachment straps on the back here, and those not only help it to bear the weight a little bit, but do help to kind of give it a little bit of structure. And once it's actually on your kit, it actually doesn't roll as much as you'd think it would. It's actually quite stable with the 16 ounce in it. This is why, like I talked about before, I don't like this little annoying ass fucking sand bucket lid, because it has this little strap on it. And what happens with this is sometimes when it's in here, it wants to turn a little bit, and because it's there's nothing really to stop it, so it can kind of turn while the lid is closed. It's not going to stop it from being held in here. Like, it's not going to break the Velcro open and cause it to fall out. But what annoys me with it is sometimes what it does, especially for a pouch like this where there's some the Velcro area sticks up a bit. Sometimes it wants to go over the top like this, by what I mean like that is when you take it out and drink out of it and then are putting it back in, if you don't look where you're putting the pouch, if it's in a difficult spot or if you're just in a hurry and slap it in there, then this can go over this like that. And then once it gets in there like that, then it can lead to interrupting the flow of the Velcro over the rest of it, and can potentially lead to a less secure attachment between the Velcro parts. Also, it just annoys me. It's like, hey, I'm Johnny, I'm gonna go play in the sand. Anyways, so here's the Iron Flask one with the tallest lid, which is the cap lid. Since this has a fixed lid, you can't really adjust it, and as you can see, obviously, it fits a little less good. It's a bit taller. It only has about 2 inches of Velcro purchase, which is, in my opinion, still enough to keep this in. They're not quite as secure as with the 16 ounce, but it's enough. I might prefer, if it was only had this much Velcro purchase, I might prefer something with a buckle as well, but it does work. It's not going to fall out unless you do some really aggressive throwing yourself around on the ground. But a couple inches of Velcro purchase is enough to keep it in there. I personally don't like the taller Iron Flask in this pouch because of the slightly shorter body of the pouch that it has as opposed to this. It's really hard to explain, again, without you actually having it on seeing it on a piece of gear, which I don't. It would be a real pain in the ass to do that because, again, it would still be super unclear if I was to try to show this on gear. But basically, because this sticks up a little bit further, not only does it have a shorter body, but it sticks up a little bit further above where it attaches to the molly. This flask in here tends to a little bit more of a tendency to want to flex out if it's sitting on a molly platform like a cummerbund or a chest rig. It tends to want to hang out a little bit more than the 16 ounce because it sticks up higher over both the body of the pouch as well as this. It kind of sags a little bit, not badly, not, it's not a deal killer, but it is noticeable. Mileage may vary, but I found that slightly annoying as a feature. I don't like floppy, saggy things. Yeah, I know what you're going to say about that, but anyways. So if you already have those pouches or you're looking to get some of the Plat-Deck pouches, it's a far better choice to have the Hydro Flask 16 ounce in there as opposed to the Iron Flask, just because it feels a little bit better when it's on your body. As far as the next pouch goes, this is the direct action Tactical load. This can fit, like I said before, pretty much everything. You can fit radios in here, 308 mags, AK mags. You can fit 3 5.56 mags. You can put a IFAK in here. This is a really great pouch, and I really like these. It's a shame they're so flippin' expensive though, and that's the other thing. If you're trying to save $1, then the 16-ounce Hydro Flask in the Plat-Attack pouch is, again, the way to go, because these things are only, I think these are $30, and if you get a sale that Plat-Attack has every so often, you can get them for less. I got mine earlier in the year. They had a 35% off sale, so I got like $20 each, which I feel like, given the way this pouch is kind of constructed, it's fine, nothing wrong with the quality, but it's pretty basic and more worth, $20 to $25 than $30. But anyways, that's just my opinion. This is like, I think, $47 or something like that. They used to be $32, which was great. Then they went up to $35, then they went up to $42, now to $47. The prices of everything just gets further and further out of reach. The rent is too damn high. Anyways, so here we have it with, well, you know what? Again, with our control, the 16 ounce literally just disappears inside this thing because it has such a nice tall body. And the lid is adjustable, but at the standard factory height of it, attaching Velcro to Velcro, it's, again, way too long for such a small bottle. Even though this pouch is considerably more expensive, this is the pouch that I highly recommend you get. If you're thinking about putting one of these flasks in a simpler M4 size pouch, because this thing is so versatile, that even if you decide later that you don't want to use it for this, you'll probably find something else to use it for. Furthermore, like I said, the lid itself is a Velcro-in lid, so it's completely adjustable down to about here on the pouch, so you can easily just push it down further and then the lid will fit perfectly if you want to use a small bottle like this. Or you can adjust it out and you can put a larger bottle like this 16-ounce Hydro Flask with accompanying sand pail lid, and with it at the standard height from Velcro to Velcro at the top. It fits almost perfectly. There's a little bit of Velcro space left over here, but the Velcro on the lid is only like 2.5, 3 inches long, and it completely engages. So it has the maximum level of Velcro engagement it can have, and the pouch, the flask is all the way in there. So that's really great. Fits in there perfectly. And then, of course, the Iron Flask pouch, the Iron Flask bottle fits in there. Again, a little taller, but notice the previous how much more deeper this sits into the actual body of the pouch. And the other thing that's great too is that pouch has some bungee as well, but it's only at the top. This pouch you can cinch up the pouch all the way down the side of it, so you get a really tight fit in here, which does help to suck it back against where it's attached to a little bit better than just the simple top bungee with the shorter body that's here. Because this has all the bungee and a taller body, it helps to pull it into place a little bit better. Now, the only downside is this slightly taller flask with the tallest lid it has, and with about the maximum amount you can adjust this flap out without the Velcro starting to, show out of the back. The Velcro attachment area is a little lacking. You're looking at about 2/3 of this area, up to about here. So that's about 1 3/4, 2 inches of attachment, which is still enough to hold it in place. As you can see, it's not just falling right off. Like, once you tap it on there, it's pretty difficult to get off. So it's not just going to fall out. Again, with that short amount of Velcro, I would prefer, a secondary closure, some sort of buckle, but it does work. I'm just not in love with either of these two pouches and the taller length of the Iron Flask bottle, which I guess brings me to our final talking points of this ridiculously long-winded review. Before we get into the final thoughts, let me go real quick to what I think is the ideal setups and alternate setups. So the alternate setup for the Iron Flask with the pop-up cap here, I'll show this real quick. It's a little bit shorter than the cap lid, not by much, but a little bit. So in a pouch like this, it does have a little bit better purchase, but you can see right here what I'm talking about per this sticking out the end of it. It does stick out quite a bit. And like I said before, there's a pretty good chance I could catch on something. If you had something else over here that you wanted to pull out, it could. It's actually, I won't even could. It's gonna hang up on it. So there's that. The cool thing about it makes a really great index point for you to make sure that you get it in the bottle with it pointing out the side every single time, unlike the little lunch pail thing from the Hydro Flask lid that can kind of turn any which way when you're putting it back in. This is really easy to index. Of course, like I said before, you can hack that off pretty easily if you just love this lid. And it is a little bit shorter, not by much, but a little bit shorter than the cap lid, so you are getting like an extra 1/4 inch of Velcro purchase, which I'm sure will make all the difference. So there it is in that one. And then here we have it in the Uber pouch. Pretty sweet. I do like the fact that it has a flat top. This cap on here sticking up is really annoying because it's just my OCD kicking in, where when you put the lid on, it's a little off. This has a nice flat top, so it's very much basically a standard lid with a pop-up part, and that's how it kind of fits in there. But anyways, that's that. So, final thoughts that we'll get into now is which one is the choice, the one flask to rule them all for tactical uses if you want to carry it in a small enough pouch to actually fit on your body. Because here's the number one problem with these. They're tall as shit. Anything taller than a 16 ounce from most of these is ridiculously tall. Like, the only reason the Iron Flask is even part of this review is it is literally the only flask I've found on the market that is almost the same size as the 16 ounce one for a bigger volume. Everything else from every other company that makes a insulated flask, either you're just going to have to go with the 16 ounce version that they offer if you want anything close to this size, or you're going to have to go with a smaller volume. Anything that any company makes that has a bigger volume than 16 ounce is usually too tall to realistically fit in any of these pouches, regardless of whether you want to fit in a magazine pouch or an Nalgene pouch. They're usually quite a bit taller. In fact, that's why you don't see anything else here. I looked through everything on the market that's like this, and most of them are like, for an 18 ounce bottle is usually with a standard lid for an 18 ounce bottle is usually like 8.5 to 10.3. I think was the biggest one that I saw. So they're all considerably bigger. And won't fit in a pouch like this well. And then, of course, if you want to carry more than 16 ounces or 18 ounces, obviously, we're all familiar with these types of steel flasks. They're just tall. It's just the nature of the way it's constructed. So if you're looking at this for something you want to use as an on-body thing for either tactical use or like outdoor use, if you want like, a hip flask or something like attached to like the waist belt of a pack, one of these two is it. So between these two, which one is the one flask to rule them all? And to be fair, it's kind of both, and you're seeing the correct way to set this up right now, and it is the Hydro Flask 16 ounce with the Iron Flask cap lid. This is, in my opinion, the way, and I'll talk about that a little bit now, because of course I'm going to talk about it. You've been here this long, you think I was going to shut up yet? No, I'm going to talk more. That's what this is all about, right? You listen to me blather because you have nothing else to do with your life. All right. Why do I think that? So, for starters, we'll reintroduce our control option. I suspect, and I cannot prove this, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm slandering the company because I don't intend to, but I suspect, in my personal theory opinion, that for starters, the Hydro Flask is, the green one here, obviously, the Hydro Flask is a little bit better quality than the Iron Flask. And there's a couple things that are cueing me off that. Number one is the weight of them compared to each other. The empty containers without a lid are very close in weight. What I say they were, 0.48 of a pound for the Hydro Flask and 0.54 of a pound for the Iron Flask. This Hydro Flask is honestly kind of a heavy little bitch for what it is. And to have something that's a couple ounces bigger, weigh almost the exact same weight, is interesting. And in my opinion, one of those sort of little red flag things that make me go, how'd they pull that off? The other red flag issue for me is that Iron Flask specifically states everywhere, do not put this in a dishwasher. It's not dishwasher safe. It has to be hand washed only, which ain't that big of a deal. I don't care if I have to hand wash it, but this is dishwasher safe. And even this, dishwasher safe. It's freaking plastic. So why isn't this metal container dishwasher safe as well? Because this one is. I highly suspect, given the very much smaller size of an 18-ounce container compared to other 18-ounce options on the market, as well as a very close weight for an 18-ounce container versus a 16-ounce Hydro Flask, considering this thing's already pretty heavy for a 16-ounce, I highly suspect, and I can't prove this, so don't take it as God's own truth, there's an inferior steel being used. Either a less good steel or a thinner version of the 18/8 steel. One of those two things is what's going on with this to get such a small height as well as such a close weight. Again, too, the fact that you have to hand wash this one versus dishwasher ability to wash it, which I'd probably still hand wash it anyway, just to take care of it. But I was looking for reviews on these flasks as well when I was going on my rampage through the market trying to find solutions to what I wanted to do to fit this on my kit. And I have seen reviews of people with these that say that they do start to rust after minimal times washing it. Now, did those people fuck something up? I don't know. Is it a problem with the Iron Flask itself? Could they just have gotten a defective one? Maybe. I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to shit on Iron Flask. I'm simply saying there's some areas of concern that I have versus the very proven track record that a company like Hydro Flask seems to have. So there's that. Other than that potential issue, I like the fit, the sort of like the OP version. Again, is I'll give Iron Flask this. Their caps are better than Hydro Flasks. I much prefer either of these two to anything else that Hydro Flask has to offer, and I kind of wish Hydro Flask made one of these two options themselves because I'd like to be able to buy from one place. But again, I don't care as long as it exists on the market and I can make it fit what I want. It's all good in my book. But this is, in my opinion, the way for a cap for either tactical use or more aggressive outdoor use, and coupled with the 16-ounce bottle here, not only do I feel like this is the better bottle, but the way that this fits in the pouches, the way that the weight when it's full rides is, in my opinion, a little bit better than the Iron Flask does it. I don't know why, because here's the thing, I'm going to just completely destroy my own argument here, because we're going to talk for a minute about the actual volume of these. So, I went and just did a super scientific method of meticulously measuring this with some measuring glasses and stuff, so take it with a grain of salt. It may not be perfect, but when I measured the amounts that I could fit in here, and like I said, for what I did with the how I measured the full weight was not to fill it to the brim, was to fill it to the actual where the bottle bends to the crease here. On both of these, the actual full quantity was for the 16-ounce was 2 cups exactly, and then for the 18-ounce was 2 cups plus an extra 1 1/3 of an ounce. So not quite entirely 2 extra ounces. It's more like an ounce and change extra between the two of these. So you're still almost 16 ounces, 17 ounces, 16 ounces, whoop-de-doo. There's an extra for both of these since they have the same diameters and about the same width of threads and everything to the top. Both of these have about the same space that is taken up with this extra rim here, and within that space is approximately an extra 1.5 ounces if you fill it to the brim, minus about 1 millimeter just to keep it from overflowing. Because some of these caps, neither of these do, which again is why I like these caps, because they are actually, they don't sit in the bottle, so you can actually fill it almost to the brim and not have it sploosh when you put the cap on. But if you have either of the Hydro Flask caps, either the regular flat lid or the zipper lid, they press into the bottle a little bit, so if you try to cap it off, it's going to sploosh if you fill it to the top. So anyways, each one of these has, within this area, about an extra 1.5 ounces if filled to the brim, minus about 1 millimeter. So the whole entire thing, for both these, if I filled them to the brim, for the 16-ounce was 2 cups plus 1.5 ounces, and for the 18-ounce was 2 cups plus 3.25 ounces. So the actual difference that I came to between these is 1.75 ounces give or take. In case you're wondering what that looks like, yeah, we're gonna go this OCD about it because I want to make my point more clearly than it would be if I just said it. So here we go. You get to sit here and watch this awesome experiment. Here's 1 ounce. And then 0.75. We'll just eyeball it. Let's say it's about right. That's how much of a difference you're looking at between these two. And if you were to stick this in your mouth, it's about either 2 sips or 1 big mouthful. Which just begs the question, does it really matter? So, one of the reasons why I went looking for an 18-ounce bottle after having already purchased the 16-ounce Hydro Flask was I felt that for the space this thing takes up in height and also the weight of it, I felt that I might not be really perfectly optimizing the amount of water I could fit in a M4 plus or minus magazine space area on my kit. And even though this Nalgene holds 6 ounces as well, number one, it doesn't do anything other than hold the water. It can't, keep it hot or cold. And number two, it's very small. So it also had the reverse effect of me feeling like I wasn't really fully and completely utilizing that space to its best effect. I went on a bit of a Google rampage trying to find 18-ounce or even 18, 19, 20-ounce versions of this that were about the same size as, in the 7 to 8 inch range. And there surprisingly really isn't anything on the market. At least nothing that's worth a shit. So this is kind of it for plastic bottles that fit within a 2x3, 2x4 M4 magazine slot. So not only did it not, provide me an extra benefit, but it really isn't it's too small. It's too small for me to say that yes, this space is being as fully utilized as it can be. Going back to this, the only reason I went looking for an 18-ounce bottle was me having the 6-ounce bottle with the, standard sipper cup lip on it and going, well, that's not really utilizing the space well. So, unfortunately, going looking for an 18-ounce bottle to try to utilize the space better, as I said before, didn't really lead to anything that would fit in a slot except for this. And once I got it and measured everything out and everything, the actual difference of 2 ounces is, well, as you probably could have told me before I went on this wonderful journey, 2 ounces is kind of underwhelming. Especially if it's not even 2 ounces. It's more like, 1.5 ounces to like 1 ounce 0.75. It's not even really 2 ounces. It's almost 2 ounces of difference. 2 ounces, you're looking at basically, the way I see it, 1.5 mouthfuls or 1 big gulp if you're thirsty. And I just gotta make, you gotta look at it this way. Like, in my opinion, if your life depends on it, is that 1 mouthful of water going to make a big difference between survival and your impending death by dehydration? I mean, who knows? Who am I to say? I've never dehydrated to death. But, I feel like I kind of got myself into, the same sort of mentality with the 18-ounce bottle as like, those grip plugs for the, Magpul grips where it's like they have that plug that holds like 3 rifle rounds. Like, if you're down to that, you're kind of fucked anyway, right? So if my ability to survive is down to 1.5 ounces of extra water, because let's be honest, we're not going to fill this thing to the brim, does it really make a difference? So with that in mind, it becomes pretty easy to kind of make the case for the Hydro Flask bottle with the Iron Flask cap lid. I mentioned before that there's about a 1.5-inch difference in height with the Iron Flask 18 ounce with the cap lid and the Hydro Flask with the zipper lid. But here's the neat little catch: the zipper lid and the cap lid are almost the same height. There's maybe half an inch-ish of difference between the two of them. So because it's almost the exact same height as a zipper lid, it still fits exactly the same in the pouches it fit in previously. Almost no difference in fitment, but in my opinion, for a far superior lid than the zipper top. Additionally, I mentioned before that I don't really care whether or not it has this thing on here, but it does provide a nice way for you to either dummy cord it or carabiner it or loop it through something. But the other thing I appreciate about this is, and I'm sure they didn't do this intentionally, but it's useful if you're taking this from a tactical consideration, is that this loop is made of rubber. So not only is it kind of squishy, which means if you're packing everything together or trying to fit this in a tighter pouch or something, it pretty much flattens completely down, but it makes almost no noise. So even though it flops around, if you're trying to be like a super cool sneaky ninja in the bushes, makes very little noise, if any. So again, another plus in the corner for this with for a tactical use. As far as the rest goes, as I've just mentioned, the difference in size and quantity that it can hold is, in my opinion, a little irrelevant. Again, I don't see the difference in a whole mouthful and a half of water. If you're that starved for water, you're gonna die anyway. It's as simple as that. And yet, at the same time, there's some slight differences, as I mentioned before, in not only how this fits in pouches, but how it wears when you have it on. Even though there's a very slight difference in weight and a very slight difference in height, these are enough to potentially exacerbate some of the less advantageous or desirable traits of wearing a water bottle, on your person, like, on your side, like on the side of a chest rig or on a cummerbund for a plate carrier. And again, the fact that this one, because of its height and the way it kind of rides in the pouches, tends to want to make it, cant out from the side of where it's mounted more than this one does. Also further upsets the balance, in my opinion, in favor of just sticking with the 16-ounce Hydro Flask. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I'm just kind of miffed that it took me this long to realize that the item that I bought first was the correct item. But if you've watched this video all the way through, you're probably in the same boat. You're probably one of those OCD people that was going, well, is this minute difference better than that minute difference? And here I am to tell you, after like an hour of you sitting here, that no, the differences don't really make a difference. If you're looking for something to mount on your kit, get the Hydro Flask, get the Iron Flask lid, and rock out with your bad self. That's all I have to say about this, and I hope you guys got something out of this video. Thanks for watching. As a secret scene, the other thing I would mention too is one of the reasons I hate this little sand pail thing is between the flexibleness of it and the way it's attached and the material that this the Hydro Flask lids are made out of is kind of like a smooth rubberized plastic. Um, which if you don't want to use this sipper lid, um, you have to continually take it on and off. And that's a real pain in the ass to do because there's no leverage on it. This rubberized plastic is slippery as shit, especially if your hands are wet or sweaty. You're pretty much stuck on trying to grab it with, one finger here, and using these little tiny nubs that this attaches to as leverage, because you can't use this for leverage because it doesn't do anything. I guess I'm supposed to just like carry it down the road by my finger. I don't get this at all. Jesus Christ, even if you want, even if you want to say this is like a carry strap and you're gonna like, carabiner it to your belt like a hippie or something, um, either of these options is just as good, if not better. Anyways, that's dumb. And that's again why I like the options from Iron Flask better, is because both of these have something sticking out that you can use as leverage to pop that lid off. Either just the little, ledge here that you can use, or you can grab this whole thing and tweak it off, or you can, even if you've put it on too tight, you can stick something in here and, break it. How you'd possibly get it on that tight, I don't know, but I've seen dumber things happen, so there you have it. So yeah, that's, in my opinion, yet another reason why I'm a big fan of the Hydro Flask bottle with the Iron Flask lids, because the Iron Flask lids are better. So there you go. There's your there's your consolation prize, Iron Flask. They make the better lids. I can't say I like the bottles any better, but their lids are worth bothering with. You're watching an even more super cool and awesome premium secret scene when it's at the end of the video and everything's off the table. Anyways, I felt it should be worth doing this. So, here you have the standard Hydro Flask 16 with the sipper cup. Sipper cup. Yeah, my sippy cup lid. The standard Iron Flask 18 ounce with the cap lid, and your standard Nalgene 32 ounce 1 liter bottle. And your 16 ounce Nalgene. There. Now it's really a complete review. And just for laughs, so that you can see a simple comparison of the OP setup for a flask. There you have it. Go ahead and put the pop-up lid, since that's the honorable mention here. So as you can see, well, maybe not quite from that angle, but between all three of these bottles, they're almost the exact same height in descending order. You're looking at about, as far as I can tell, about a 1/4 inch in difference in height between the three of these. And this is partially the main reason why I wanted to go to a 16 or 18 ounce flask on my body instead of the Nalgene. And that is, the height wasn't the big deal, it was the width. The just fucking massive difference in these two. I mean, I could put this inside here and still have room left over inside this. And having that on either the side of your chest rig or your cummerbund, to me, was just obnoxious as hell. And I don't understand why it's such a big deal with a lot of people, where they want to put a bottle instead of a hydro bladder. I'd honestly rather carry the USGI canteen on my side than this ridiculously round and rotund, oversized thing, because, as some people have pointed out, at least the canteen has a bit of a flex in the middle, so it kind of conforms to your side, whereas this thing is round. And for a smaller bottle like this, it isn't that big of a deal. It really just feels like, carrying a slightly thicker double M4 pouch with a pair of M4 magazines in it. This is like a fucking millstone hanging off your side. There's a huge difference between the sizes, the weights, and how it all, how it all fits on your person. It's like a even bigger issue than the small microcosm between, this and this, where I was talking about this one tends to want to kind of hang out a little bit and flop around a little bit more because it's that much taller, and the weight is a little bit higher up, and it's not quite as ideal. Whereas with this one, the weight is a little bit lower down, it's a little more, gravitically centered in the pouch and kind of stays upright a little bit better. You take that very small, almost imperceptible difference between these two, apply it to this, and boy, does it magnify it a lot. So that's why I kind of like, if you've ever watched Spirit Systems' Mutant Pouch Overview, where he talks about why he likes this pouch. Actually, it might be his Gear Load Up video, whichever one it is. One of the guys from Spirit just talks about, this Nalgene and where, why he likes using it. And I kind of like that, but like I said, I want something a little more. So I feel like for the space that you're going to use, this is probably the ideal option. So there you go. There's your full-on, ridiculously overcomplicated review for why this is the best option if you want a bottle to mount on your actual kit that's going to be on your actual, like, torso, not a belt. Although this would also go well with a belt. Yep, I'm pretty much probably going to have to change my username to Nut and Fancy pretty soon because, boy, am I really walking in those giant footsteps of ridiculous overlong reviews.